The alarm on Marcus Johnson's phone went off at 5:15 in the morning. Not because he wanted to wake at 5:15. He wanted to sleep until noon. But wanting and having were two different things now. They'd been different for 6 years, ever since the triplets were born. Ever since his wife decided she couldn't do this version of things. Marcus lay in the dark for exactly 45 seconds. That brief window where he could pretend the day hadn't started yet. Then he got up. The apartment was cold. The heating system worked maybe 60% of the time, which meant the radiators clanked and hissed in the middle of the night, but left things perpetually chilly in the early morning. Marcus had learned to layer, learned to calculate how many degrees Fahrenheit he could sacrifice before paying for a repair that would cost more than his weekly grocery budget. He moved through the small house in practiced silence. The floorboards creaked on the third step. He avoided it. In the kitchen, he opened the drawer where he kept the bills. Not all of them, just the ones that were past due, or about to be. Electric bill due Friday, 15 days away, or 17 if he counted today and the day after he got paid. But he'd done the math 100 times. After the last late charge with the penalty attached, he had $43 to spend on groceries this week. $43 to feed 3 6-year-olds and himself. No eggs this week. Marcus started the water for tea, not coffee. Coffee was a luxury now. Tea was cheaper. He'd get 1 tea bag and reuse it 2 or 3 times, and it would still do the job. His body had learned to appreciate small things, or maybe it had just learned to settle. He moved to the window and looked out at the street. Grey November morning. The kind of cold that wasn't dramatic, but was patient. It would seep into everything slowly. He'd need to weather strip the windows again this winter. Use plastic sheets and caulk to keep the heat in. That was on the list of things he'd do when he had money. That list was very long. The tea steeped while he got the bread. Fresh bread cost too much. So he bought the discounted loaves from the bakery section. A day or 2 past fresh, but still good, still filling. He sliced it thin. Butter was expensive too, so he used just enough to make it taste less like eating air. The house had 3 bedrooms. The master bedroom was his. The other 2 belonged to Darius, Aiden, and Simone. He went to wake them. Darius was the oldest by 4 minutes. In sleep, he looked even younger than 6. A small boy in superhero pajamas that were already getting small in the shoulders. Marcus sat on the edge of the bed and put his hand on his son's shoulder. Not a shake, just a gentle pressure. Darius's eyes opened immediately. He didn't cry or whine about waking up. That had stopped a long time ago. Instead, he looked at his father's face, seemed to be reading something there, calculating, understanding. "Morning, buddy," Marcus said. "Morning, Papa," Darius replied, his voice small in the dark room. Aiden was next. He was in the other bed. The one they shared in this room because 3 separate bedrooms sounded nice. But one shared room meant one space to heat, one set of sheets to wash. Aiden was the opposite of his brother. He woke up asking questions. "Papa, why are we getting up?" he asked before he was even fully awake. "School, buddy, then work for me." "But it's dark still." "I know, baby, it's dark in the morning." "Why?" Marcus didn't answer that. Some questions didn't have answers that made sense at 6 years old. Simone was curled in the corner of the bedroom on a mattress on the floor. The room was small. There wasn't space for 3 beds, so he'd made this work. 2 beds pushed together. One mattress beside it. She slept the hardest of all 3, which Marcus understood without her saying it. She was working harder in her sleep, because she was paying attention to everything while awake. When Marcus knelt beside her, she was already opening her eyes. "Hey, little girl," he whispered. "Morning, Papa," she said. And then she did something she did almost every morning. She wrapped her small arms around his neck and held on for 3 seconds. Not long, but long enough. Long enough for Marcus to feel like he was still necessary, that he still mattered to someone who couldn't leave him. By 5:50, all 3 children were dressed. Darius wore the blue shirt Marcus had washed last night. Aiden wore the grey hoodie that was getting small. Simone wore her favorite dress, the one with the flowers, even though it was cold outside, and would be cold inside the car. She liked the way it made her feel, like someone's daughter, someone's loved child. They sat at the kitchen table. Marcus set down a plate with bread, tea in small cups with milk and honey, because he'd found a large container of honey at the discount store 3 months ago. Darius ate quietly. He never asked for anything more. This was, Marcus had realized over the years, a kind of trauma. A child shouldn't know how to accept less without asking. But Darius had learned. Aiden looked at the bread. "Where are the eggs?" he asked. "No eggs this week, baby. The bread's good though, try it." Aiden looked at the bread like it might transform into an egg if he just stared hard enough. It didn't. Simone did something that almost broke Marcus in half. She didn't eat her bread. Instead, she set her portion on his plate. When she thought he wasn't looking, she was very careful about it, very deliberate. She looked up to see if he noticed. He did notice. He always noticed. "Baby, no," Marcus said quietly. "You eat that." She looked at her empty spot on the table, then back at him. "I'm not hungry," she said. It was the most obvious lie. 6-year-olds weren't good at lying. Their bodies gave them away. The way Simone's stomach tightened, the way she was trying not to show that she was hungry. Marcus put her bread back on her plate. "You're hungry," he said gently. "I need you to eat. Please." She hesitated, and then she did. Because children, even 6-year-old children who understood poverty in ways they shouldn't have to, still trusted their fathers. They still believed that when their fathers said it would be okay, it might actually be. By 6:15, the children were ready. School supplies in backpacks that Marcus had bought at a church thrift store. Coats that fit okay, not new, but clean and functional. Marcus walked them to the community care center, which was 5 blocks away. He held Simone's hand. Darius held Simone's other hand. Aiden walked beside them, pointing out things that interested him. A bird, a fire hydrant, a delivery truck. The care center was where children stayed during the day. While parents worked, it cost money. Money Marcus could barely afford. But it was cheaper than other options. And the staff knew the children. They didn't treat them like problems. They treated them like kids. At 7 a.m., Marcus kissed each child goodbye and walked back toward his apartment. He had 10 minutes to shower, change into work clothes, and head to the warehouse where he'd work the night shift, 8 p.m. to 4 a.m. 5 nights a week at $14.50 an hour. The math was simple if you didn't think too hard about what it meant. At 40 hours a week, he made $580 before taxes. After taxes and Social Security, closer to $450. Rent was $890. Electricity would be around $120 in winter. Water, gas, internet that he needed for job applications. And keeping up with school forms, another $150. Food at least $200 a week for 4 people, ideally more. Childcare $300 a week. He was short every month, not by a little, by hundreds. There were only 3 ways to handle that shortfall. One was to not pay something. The other was to pick up extra shifts. The third was to look for a better job. Marcus had tried all 3. A year ago, he'd applied for an advanced electrical engineering program through the city. It was a 2-year track. That could have moved him from maintenance work into design, from fixing things other people broke, to building things that helped communities. The application had been accepted. He'd gotten the letter in August. It had felt like salvation. Then he'd done the math. The classes were in the evenings. They required him to be unavailable for pickup at the care center on certain days. No one was coming to get his kids. There was no safety net. His ex-wife Diane had made it clear 6 years ago that she couldn't do this. Not the poverty, not the constant worry, not the way every decision had to factor in the cost to the children. So she left. She sent money sometimes, but not reliably, and not enough to change the trajectory. He'd withdrawn the application 4 days before the deadline, told himself he'd try again next cycle. That had been 14 months ago. He hadn't tried again. Instead, he'd gotten very good at a particular kind of lying. He told himself he was fine. Fine with the job, fine with the hours, fine with the way his body hurt from moving boxes all night. Fine with the way he fell asleep watching the children's school programs because he'd been awake for 37 hours straight. What Marcus had learned over 6 years of single parenthood was that fine was a word. That covered a lot of pain. The care center called at 5:30 in the afternoon. Marcus was at work. He'd clocked in at 8 p.m. and was in the middle of unloading a truck when his phone buzzed. He almost didn't look at it. Company policy said phones were supposed to stay in your locker, but Marcus always checked during his breaks. Always. Because something could happen to the kids. The call was from Ms. Patricia, the woman who ran the care center. "Hi, Marcus," she said, and her voice had that particular tone that made his stomach clench. "Everything's okay, but we have a situation." "What situation?" Marcus heard the immediate tension in his own voice. "We're closing early today. Maintenance on the HVAC system. I sent 2 notices home this week about it." Marcus's mind raced. He had received something, an email, a piece of paper. He'd put it somewhere he didn't find when he was looking for the thing he'd actually needed to find. "It's okay," Ms. Patricia continued, "but I need one of the parents to pick up by 6. We can't keep them past that." Marcus checked the time, 5:33. The warehouse was 20 minutes from the care center. Maybe more in traffic, and he'd just clocked in. "I'll be there," he said. "I'll leave right now." He hung up and walked directly to his supervisor, a woman named Keisha, who'd always been fair, but wasn't known for flexibility. "I have to leave," Marcus said. "My kids, there's a situation." Keisha's expression shifted. She was a mother too. She understood. "You're going to get a written warning," she said. "But go." Marcus went. He clocked out. Losing the hour and a half he'd already worked. Losing the pay. Losing his chance to cover the electric bill by 3 days. And he drove. The old pickup truck groaned when he asked it to go faster. The check engine light had been on for 2 months. He couldn't afford to fix it yet. But today he needed it to work. And it did. He drove past the university campus, where if his life had gone differently, he might have been sitting in a classroom right now. Instead, he was driving to pick up his children from a place they should have been able to stay for their full day. The care center was a converted house on Garfield Street. By the time Marcus pulled up, it was 5:57, 3 minutes to spare. Darius, Aidan, and Simone came out with Ms. Patricia, their backpacks in hand. Darius's face didn't change when he saw his father. He already understood that his father was their safety net, that sometimes the safety net had to be deployed urgently. Aidan asked, "Papa, why are you picking us up early?" "The care center has to close today, buddy. Air conditioning thing." "Will they be okay?" Aidan asked. "Meaning the building, meaning the system, meaning the world that was supposed to keep functioning smoothly, but didn't always." "They'll be fine," Marcus said. "Come on, let's go." Back in the truck, the children sat in the back. The seatbelts were old, but they worked. Marcus drove through the grey evening, toward home. The sun was setting early, the way it did in November. By the time they got home, it would be dark. He'd have maybe 2 hours with them, before he'd need to go back to the warehouse. Or rather, before he'd need to make a decision about whether to go back to the warehouse. Every choice was a calculation. Go back to work, lose this evening with them, but keep the job, stay with them. Keep the job but lose the money from tonight. Move the eviction date forward. There was no good option. There was only the option that cost him less. The thing about being a single father was that every decision you made felt like it was made on behalf of the children. You weren't just choosing for yourself. You were choosing their lives, their stability, their future, and the options were always somehow wrong. By the time he pulled onto their street, it was 6:15 p.m. The apartment building looked tired. It looked like something that was slowly breaking down. The paint was peeling in long strips. There was a leak in the roof that appeared every time it rained heavily. The landlord was supposed to fix it but hadn't. The windows stuck in their frames. The front door lock had been broken for 3 months. But it was home. It was where the children slept. And Marcus had learned to love it. The way you love something broken but necessary. He parked the truck and looked at his children in the mirror. "We're going to have a quiet evening," he said. "Make dinner, maybe read some books. How does that sound?" "Can we play outside?" Aiden asked. "Too dark soon, buddy, but tomorrow maybe." Inside, Marcus made dinner from what was left. Rice, beans, some carrots he'd bought 2 days ago, a small container of hot sauce. The children sat at the table. Simone was quiet the way she got quiet, when she was paying attention to everything, watching, understanding more than a 6-year-old should understand. By 8 p.m. the children were in bed. Marcus sat in the dark living room and did something he didn't do often. He opened his laptop and looked at job listings, warehouse work, delivery driving, security guards. All of them paid somewhere in the $14 to $16 range. All of them required you to be away for 10 to 12 hours a day. All of them meant childcare costs. That ate half the increase. He closed the laptop. Instead, he went to each child's bedroom one more time. This was his ritual. The one thing that was just for him. The one thing that made him feel like a father. And not just a man trying not to drown. He checked on Darius, who was sleeping with his face turned toward the window. A small child, a child who'd learned too early to be quiet, to accept less, to not ask for things he wouldn't get. He checked on Aiden, who had kicked off his blanket, and slept like he was still asking questions, even in sleep. And he checked on Simone, curled in the corner on her mattress, one hand curled into a fist, like she was holding onto something precious. "I've got you," Marcus whispered to each of them. "I promise, I'll keep you safe." It was a promise he was terrified he couldn't keep. The next evening, Marcus picked up the children from the care center at 3 p.m. Ms. Patricia pulled him aside. "I wanted to tell you," she said. "I sent those notices about the closure. I know they're easy to miss, but I wanted to make sure you knew. We'll make sure it doesn't happen like this again." Marcus appreciated this, the small kindness of someone acknowledging that he was trying, that things were hard, that he wasn't failing on purpose. "Thank you," he said. He drove the children home. By 4 p.m., they were all in the truck, headed back toward downtown. Marcus had an appointment he couldn't miss, a follow-up at the community health center. Simone needed her vaccinations updated, and Marcus had finally managed to schedule it, after trying for 3 months. The appointment was at 4:30, but first he'd pick up the children from the care center, which meant picking them up an hour early from their routine, which meant taking them to the appointment instead of leaving them in care. It was logistically complicated. It was exhausting. But it was life. The clinic was on the opposite side of town from their house. The drive would take 40 minutes. Marcus had just gotten the children buckled in and was about to head out when his supervisor, Keisha, called. "Marcus, can you come in early tonight?" she asked. "We got a big shipment. We could use your hands." Early meant 6 p.m. instead of 8 p.m. Early meant he'd get extra hours. Extra hours meant moving the eviction date back by 3 days. "I have an appointment," Marcus said. "Medical. I can come in after maybe 8:30. There was a pause. He could hear Keisha calculating whether it was worth it. "Yeah, okay," she said. 8:30, that'll work." Marcus hung up and pulled out of the care center parking lot. The afternoon was grey. November was the kind of month that sucked the color out of everything. The sky, the buildings, the people's faces. Everything looked like it had been drained of something vital. The drive to the clinic took him through neighborhoods he'd never explored. Residential streets with older houses. Some beautiful. Some falling apart. Parks where people walk dogs. Small stores with names he didn't recognize. The kind of places that existed, but that Marcus never had time to really see. The clinic appointment took exactly 35 minutes. Simone was brave. The nurse complimented her. Marcus paid the sliding scale fee. $15 because that was what they could afford. And then they were back in the truck. The appointment was supposed to take an hour, and it had taken 40 minutes. Because Simone was cooperative, and the staff was efficient, that meant Marcus had time. He could either head directly to the warehouse, getting there early, or he could take a longer route home, giving the children a little more evening. He chose the longer route. There was a road that headed out past the edge of town. It ran past fields and forests, the kind of landscape that reminded Marcus why he'd never wanted to live in a big city. He'd grown up in one of these towns. Before, the choices of adulthood had pulled him toward the coast, and then toward the city, and then toward exactly where he was now. The sun was setting. By the time they got on the long road, it was almost 6 p.m. The sky was turning that particular color it turned in late autumn. A mix of orange and purple and gray, like something that was bruised, but still beautiful. "Look, Papa," Aiden said, pointing out the window. "The sky is doing colors." "It is, buddy. It's doing colors." "Why does it do colors?" Marcus didn't have the energy to explain light refraction. "Because it's sunset," he said. "The sun is saying goodbye for the day." "Will it come back?" Aiden asked. "Yeah, little man. It always comes back." The long road went on for miles, with not much traffic. Marcus was thinking about the appointment. Simone's vaccines were updated. She was healthy. That was good. That was one less thing to worry about. He was thinking about work. The big shipment meant hours. Hours meant money. Money meant maybe, just maybe, they could stay in this apartment for another month, without the threat of eviction hanging over every decision. He was thinking about the children. About Darius's quiet understanding of how things worked, about Aiden's constant questions, about Simone's empathy, the way she tried to take care of him, even though she was 6, and shouldn't have to. These were the thoughts that occupied his mind most of the time. There wasn't space for much else. By the time he pulled onto their street, it was 6:15 p.m. In the rearview mirror, Marcus could see the 3 children in the back seat. Darius was pointing out something to Simone. Aiden was watching the landscape pass. They were good kids. They were surviving. That was the best Marcus could do right now. Make sure they survived, and that they knew they were loved while doing it. And then about 7 miles out of town, Marcus saw something on the roadside. At first it looked like clothes, like someone had thrown a garbage bag out of a window, or like laundry had blown off a line and landed in the ditch. But as the truck got closer, the shape became clearer. It was a person, a woman, lying face down on the shoulder of the road. Her body was still. Her dark coat was spread around her like something that had been shattered. Marcus's foot was still on the accelerator. He could keep driving. Just keep going. The children were in the truck. He could rationalize it later. He'd call 911, let the professionals handle it. Or he could not call anyone. He could just keep driving, and this woman would become someone else's problem. He was 40 minutes away from work. He needed those hours, he needed the money, every calculation he'd done in his life said to keep driving. But then Darius spoke from the back seat. "Papa, there's someone on the road." Not a question, a statement of fact, an observation that his father had also seen this. Because they were looking at the same world, sharing the same moment. "Yeah," Marcus said, I see them." His foot stayed on the accelerator. "Papa Darius again." "Yeah, buddy. Aren't you gonna stop?" Marcus's hands gripped the steering wheel. 50 meters now. The woman's face was turned to the side. Her hair was wet. She was wearing an expensive coat, the kind Marcus recognized because he'd seen it in the window of the department store. Where he'd once stopped to look at price tags, that coat cost more than he made in 2 months. 30 meters. He could keep going. Aiden leaned forward. "Papa, is she sleeping?" "I don't know, baby." "Is she dead?" Aiden asked. The way 6-year-olds ask questions, without the social filters that adults develop, to avoid uncomfortable truths. 20 meters. Marcus's jaw clenched. He could calculate the cost of stopping. He could calculate the cost of not stopping. He could sit with this feeling of being pulled in 2 directions. Both bad. Simone's voice came from the back seat. Small. Clear. "Papa, isn't someone supposed to stop?" That was the moment everything changed. Marcus had no answer to that question because the answer was yes. Someone was supposed to stop. Someone was supposed to choose presence over convenience. Someone was supposed to see another person suffering and decide that this person's survival mattered more than their own schedule. Marcus Johnson was supposed to be that person. He pulled the truck to the side of the road. For a moment he just sat there, with his hands on the steering wheel, understanding that this choice was going to cost him in ways he couldn't yet calculate. Then he got out. The woman was pale. Not tired pale. Sick pale. The color of someone whose body was shutting down. Her breathing was shallow. There was water on her clothes. She'd been in water recently, or in the rain, or Marcus didn't let himself think about it. He knelt beside her. Her skin was ice cold. He reached for her neck, checking for a pulse. His hands were shaking in a way he couldn't control. There was nothing at first, and then a flutter. Faint, like something very far away trying to get closer. She was alive. He checked her wrist for a more reliable pulse. It was there, slow and weak, but there. And on her temple there was a bruise. Dark, fresh, not the kind of bruise you got from falling. Marcus stood up and looked at the empty road. No houses, no help, no one. Just him. 3 kids in a truck, a woman whose heart was barely beating, and a choice that had already been made. He went back to the truck. "We're taking her to the clinic," he said to the children. "The one we were just at. They can help." "Is she gonna die?" Aiden asked. "Not if I can help it," Marcus said. And he meant it. He meant it the way he meant everything he had ever said to his children. He meant it as a promise and a prayer, and a declaration of the kind of man he was going to be, even if it cost him everything. He carefully lifted the woman into the back seat of the truck, next to the children. She was lighter than he expected. Or maybe he was stronger than he knew. Darius shifted closer to Aiden to make room. Simone watched without fear, only quiet concern. Marcus got back in the driver's seat. "Hold still," he said to the children. "We're going to go fast, but safely, okay." "Okay, Papa," they responded in unison, the way they did when they understood something serious was happening. He drove back toward the clinic, with his eyes on the road and his mind on the math. An hour away from work, probably 2 hours at the clinic. The money he wouldn't make, the invoice he wouldn't cover. But he had made his choice, and there was no taking it back now. The clinic was a converted house on Jefferson Street. It was the same place where Simone had gotten her vaccinations 3 hours earlier. Marcus knew the way. He drove fast but carefully, the way you drive when someone's life depends on not getting into an accident. In the back seat, the woman was still unconscious, but she moved slightly and her eyes flickered. For just a moment they opened, and her gaze landed on the children. She looked confused, and then something shifted in her face. A softness, a recognition of something. "Kindness still exists," she whispered. Then her eyes closed again and she was gone. Marcus heard the words, even though they were barely audible. Kindness still exists because he'd seen her, and he'd chosen to help. Because he'd brought his children with him, instead of finding someone to leave them with. Because the choice to stop had been harder than the choice to pass by. And he'd chosen it anyway. The clinic was open. There was a waiting area with plastic chairs and magazines from 3 years ago. Marcus pulled up to the entrance and ran inside. "I need help," he said to the receptionist. "There's a woman in my truck. She's unconscious. I found her on the road." The receptionist moved fast. A nurse came out. They wheeled the woman inside on a gurney, asking Marcus questions he couldn't answer. Who was she? How long had she been there? Had there been an accident? "I don't know," Marcus said. "I just found her on the road. She was just lying there." The medical staff took over. Marcus and the children were left in the waiting area. It was 6:40 p.m. Marcus pulled out his phone and texted Keisha. "Situation came up, not going to make it tonight, I'll explain tomorrow." Her response came back fast. "Everything okay?" Marcus looked at his children. Darius was sitting quietly, processing. Aiden was asking questions under his breath. Simone was watching the doors where the woman had disappeared. "Yeah," Marcus typed back. "We'll be fine." It wasn't true. But he didn't know how to explain the truth to his supervisor. The truth was that he'd just lost the money from tonight's shift. The truth was that the eviction date had moved closer. The truth was that he'd made a choice, and now he had to live with the consequences. The waiting area had a clock on the wall. 6:47 p.m., then 7 p.m., then 7:30 p.m. The hours added up. Each hour was money not made. Each hour was a day closer to losing the apartment. Aiden fell asleep against Marcus's side. Darius stared at nothing. Simone held Marcus's hand. At 8:15 p.m., a doctor came out. She was older, with the particular exhaustion of someone who'd been awake too long and had learned to function through it. "She's stable," the doctor said. "Severe dehydration, exhaustion, but also..." The doctor paused. "She has trauma to the head. Did she fall?" "Was there an accident?" "I found her on the road," Marcus said. "I don't know what happened." The doctor studied him, not suspiciously, but carefully, like she was trying to understand who would bring a dying woman to the clinic, while his children sat in the waiting area. "You did the right thing," the doctor said. "Stopping, getting her here. You saved her life." Marcus wanted to say that stopping was easy, that the hard part was going to be figuring out how to make rent next month, but he didn't say that. "Can I see her?" he asked instead. "Once she's in a room, give us a few minutes." The few minutes turned into 30. The clock said 8:47 p.m. The shift that Marcus had missed was half over. He could have been loading trucks, making money, keeping the lights on. Instead, he was sitting in a waiting area, with his sleeping son and his watching daughter, and his quiet son. "Papa," Darius said finally, "did we do the right thing?" It was a 6-year-old asking a question that adults spent their whole lives trying to answer. "Yeah, buddy, but..." Marcus said. "Yeah, we did." "Even though it costs us?" Darius asked. Marcus looked at his son. When had Darius learned to think about cost? When had his childhood become so practical? Even though it costs us, Marcus confirmed. A nurse came and got them. The woman was in a private room. She was sitting up, conscious, her eyes clearer than they'd been on the roadside. But there was something about her bearing that suggested she was used to being in control, used to being the authority in rooms. She looked at Marcus first, then at each of the children. Her gaze lingered on Simone. "You brought them," she said. "Not a thank you, not a greeting, an observation, a test." "They were with me," Marcus said. "I know." The woman's eyes never left Simone. "But most people would have found somewhere to drop them first, before stopping for me." Marcus didn't know what to say to that. "I couldn't," he said finally. The woman turned her full attention to him. And her eyes, they were sharp. Fever bright, maybe. Or just naturally intense. But they held the kind of attention that made Marcus understand very clearly that this woman saw things. She saw what his sacrifice meant. Her name was Dr. Elena Hartwell. She told him this while still sitting in the hospital bed, while still recovering from whatever had happened to her on that empty road. She told him with the kind of precision that suggested she was used to introducing herself, used to people knowing what she did and who she was. "I'm a medical researcher," she said. "I was driving back from field work when my car broke down. I was trying to reach my hotel when I collapsed." She didn't say why she collapsed. She didn't mention the bruise on her temple. She didn't explain any of the things that Marcus wanted to understand. Instead, she looked at Simone again. "That little girl reminded me of someone I lost," she said quietly. There was pain in her voice. That made Marcus instinctively not ask questions. Some things weren't meant to be interrogated. Before they left, Dr. Hartwell handed Marcus a business card. Cream-colored stock, black lettering. Dr. Elena Hartwell, medical researcher. Below it, a phone number and an address. "If you ever need help," she said, "come to me. I mean that." Marcus took the card. He didn't expect to use it, but as he walked out of the hospital with his 3 children, the weight of the card in his pocket felt heavier than anything else he was carrying. 5 days passed. Marcus worked his shifts. He dropped the children at the community care center. He came home and slept 4 hours before the next shift. The calculations continued. Bills came and went. The electric bill got paid with a late fee. Another bill didn't get paid. The cycle continued. He hadn't called Dr. Hartwell. He wasn't going to. That was how the world worked. You helped someone. They were grateful. Everyone moved on. You didn't ask for help. You didn't expect anything. Thursday morning, Magda, the neighbor who sometimes watched the children, knocked on his door. "There's a woman in your driveway," she said. "In a fancy car. She says she knows you." Marcus's heart did something complicated. The black Mercedes was parked in front of his apartment building. Even there in the middle of the dusty street, it looked like it came from a different world. Dr. Eleanor Hartwell stood beside it. She was dressed in a cream-colored sweater and tailored jeans. Her bag was expensive. Not that Marcus knew brands, but he recognized the weight of what it cost. The kind of object that a person like him would never own. The kind of thing that represented access to a world he'd never be part of. She was completely recovered. No hospital gown, no fragility. Just power and competence. And the kind of presence that made the whole street feel smaller. "You came to the house," Marcus said. It wasn't a greeting. "I did," she said. "I wanted to see how you lived." Marcus's face went hot. "Why?" he asked. "Because understanding context matters," she said. "I need to know if you're the kind of person who stops for dying women because of who you are or because of what you're desperate enough to do. Those are not the same thing, and it matters for what comes next." The words landed like a slap. She walked past him toward the apartment. He followed, understanding that he didn't have a choice anymore. She'd shown up at his house. She was going to see his life. The apartment was clean, but it was small and worn. The furniture was old. The carpet had stains that wouldn't come out. The kitchen barely held 2 people at once. Everything Marcus had tried to hide from the world was right there, in the peeling paint and the water stain on the ceiling. She observed everything, not with judgment exactly, but with the attention of someone taking inventory. Rent, she asked. $890 a month. Utilities were around $120 a month. Groceries. Marcus hesitated. $200 if we're careful. She was calculating. He could see it in her face. The children came out of the bedroom. Darius first, careful and observing. Then Aiden, curious and questioning. Then Simone, who stopped when she saw the woman and went very still. I remember you, Simone said. I remember you too, Simone, Dr. Hartwell said. She looked at the child like she was seeing something that no one else could see. She asked the children questions. What were their names? What did they want to be when they grew up? Darius said, I want to protect my sisters always. Aiden said, I want to build machines that help people. Simone said, I want everyone to stop crying. Dr. Hartwell listened to each answer like it was the most important thing anyone had ever said. Your children have something rare, she said to Marcus. They still believe the world is kind. Before she left that day, she asked Marcus to sit with her. The apartment had a small kitchen table. They sat there while the children played in the other room. Simone kept one eye on them, understanding that something important was happening. When I was 17, Dr. Hartwell said, I was alone, I was pregnant, I was terrified. Marcus listened. I was on a road, she continued, not unlike the one where you found me, and I counted the cars that passed. 43 cars drove past me before one stopped. She looked out the kitchen window at nothing. The woman who stopped took me to a hospital. That hospital gave me the chance to become something more than a scared teenage girl. It gave me a chance to survive. What happened to... Marcus started. My daughter didn't survive, Dr. Hartwell said quietly. But I did. And I've spent my life wondering if I owed the woman who stopped something I could never repay. She turned to look at Marcus. Every time I see you with those 3 children, I see what I lost. And I see the kind of man who would stop for a stranger. So I need to understand something. What? Marcus asked. I need to understand what the world would look like if people like you got the same opportunities as people like me. Marcus didn't answer because he didn't know the answer. I'd like to help, Dr. Hartwell said, but I need to understand first if you'll let me. She came on Friday nights. That was the first rule. Every Friday at exactly 6 p.m., Marcus would prepare dinner. Not fancy, but better than usual. The children would be bathed and clean. The apartment would be organized. It became a ritual. Dr. Hartwell would arrive in her Mercedes. She'd dress in expensive clothes. That reminded Marcus of the gap between them. She never pretended otherwise. She was there as someone from a different world, offering what her world had to give. The 4th Friday, Aiden asked why only Fridays. Because I need to know you're consistent, she said, that you don't use my help as an excuse to stop doing the work. The words landed as criticism, but they were also true. She was right. If Marcus started to rely on her without also doing the hard work of improving his own situation, then what she was offering wouldn't be help. It would be dependence. She observed methodically. How much was rent? What did food cost? Was the roof still leaking? Were the children sleeping okay? She wasn't checking in like a friend would check in. She was calculating, understanding what he needed, and how to structure help that would actually change things. On the 5th Friday, she handed him a piece of paper, a phone number, an address. There's a job, she said. Senior logistics coordinator, better pay, Better hours. The manager owes me a favor. I've told him you exist. Now you need to show him why you matter. I can't, Marcus started. You don't know if you can, she interrupted. Until you try. Don't call him with my name. Call him because you're qualified. I'm not, Marcus said. You've been organizing warehouse logistics for 8 years, she said. You are absolutely qualified. The only thing you lack is the belief that you are. She left that evening without staying for tea, just handed him the information and left. Marcus called the number. He got the job. It paid $28 an hour. That was double what he'd been making. That was the difference between eviction and stability. That was the difference between bread and eggs. 2 weeks later, on another Friday, she handed him a different piece of paper. This one was a scholarship offer. This comes from my foundation, she said. Full tuition for an advanced elementary program, then middle school, then academy prep. But Darius is going to earn it by being extraordinary. He already is, but he needs to know that the world sees it too. Darius cried that night. Marcus held him and realized that his son had internalized something he shouldn't have had to internalize. The belief that good things didn't happen to people like them. The belief that excellence was only rewarded if you looked a certain way or came from a certain place. You're extraordinary, Marcus told his son, and now the world knows it. By the 8th Friday, the children had scholarships. Marcus had a better job. The apartment wasn't getting evicted. They were moving from desperate to stable. On that evening, after the children were asleep, Dr. Hartwell and Marcus sat in the kitchen. She was using one of the cheap ceramic cups, not bringing her own, a small gesture of honoring his space. Why didn't you just move on after the hospital? Marcus asked. A long silence. Because someone once stopped for me, she said finally, and that moment saved more than my life. It gave me meaning again. She looked at her hands. I was 17, alone, pregnant. I was standing on a road and I was counting cars. 43 cars. Each one that passed me was a confirmation that I didn't matter, that the world didn't care, that I was invisible. How many before someone stopped? Marcus asked. The 44th car, she said. A woman got out. She took me to a hospital. That hospital took care of me, gave me resources, helped me understand that I was more than my circumstances. She turned to Marcus. My daughter's name was Claire, she said. She was born premature. She didn't survive, but I survived, and I've been trying for 30 years to become worthy of that survival. Marcus didn't know what to say. You calculated and chose presence anyway, she said. That's the difference between most people and people like you. Most people choose survival, just their own. But you chose presence, for a stranger. With your children watching, she paused. I can't undo that you were poor before you stopped for me, but I can give you resources, knowledge, opportunity, the same things that were given to me by the grace of a stranger. Marcus felt something shift in his understanding. So you're helping me because of what she did for you? He asked. I'm helping you because I need to be forgiven for something I'm not responsible for, Dr. Hartwell said quietly. And helping you become something better feels like a way to honor Claire's memory. Marcus understood then. This wasn't charity. This was transaction. Beautiful, necessary, heartbreaking transaction. She was using his gratitude to heal herself, and he was allowing it because he needed help. Both of them were getting something. Both of them were giving something. Neither of them was clean in the exchange. I understand, Marcus said. Do you? She asked. Yeah, he said. I think I do. Over the next months, the help continued. Aiden's engineering curiosity was cultivated. Dr. Hartwell brought books about engineers, about machines, about ways to build things that helped people. The boy's eyes lit up when she talked about water systems and electricity and structures that could change communities. Simone watched everything. She understood that stopping for people mattered. She understood that her father had made a choice that cost him, and someone had recognized that choice and decided it was worth helping. Darius thrived in his new program. He came home excited about things he was learning. He came home believing that the world was a place where he could be extraordinary. The eviction notice never came. The electric bill got paid on time. There was enough money for eggs sometimes. And every Friday, Dr. Hartwell came to the house. One evening, she brought a document. "This is a trust fund," she said, "for their college education. It's small right now, but it will grow. By the time they're 18, it will be enough for them to have choices, real choices, not just survival choices." Marcus felt something break open in his chest. "I don't know how to thank you," he said. "You don't have to," she said. "You already did. You stopped for me on a road when no one else did. Everything else is just me trying to make that moment mean something." After about a year of the Friday visits, something changed. Diane, Marcus's ex-wife, reached out. She wanted to reconnect with the children. She'd been struggling with her own things. Addiction, instability, the reasons why she'd left in the first place. But she was in a better place now. She had a job. She had a small apartment. She wanted to be part of the children's lives again. Marcus didn't trust it, but the children needed a mother. And Diane was their mother. He agreed to let her start visiting. At first it was supervised visits, coffee with Marcus and the children at a park, lunch where they could all watch her, and understand whether she was stable. Gradually it became less supervised. She came to the house. She spent time with the children. She seemed genuinely changed. And Marcus started to hope that maybe, just maybe, his family could be pieced back together in some way. But Dr. Hartwell noticed the shift. She still came on Fridays, but something had changed in her demeanor. She was more distant, more observing than participating. She asked Marcus about Diane, about whether things were moving quickly, about whether Marcus was being careful. "She's their mother," Marcus said. "She has a right to be part of their lives." "I know," Dr. Hartwell said, "but I need you to be careful. People aren't always what they seem." Marcus didn't understand the warning then. Diane revealed the truth while they were sitting in the park. She'd been working for a real estate development company, Richard Stratton's company, Stratton Group. She'd been paid to gather information about families like Marcus's, about neighborhoods like his, about people who would be resistant to selling their homes. Because Stratton Group wasn't just buying properties, they were rezoning neighborhoods, taking areas that had been residential for decades, and changing them to mixed commercial. Once that happened, the long-term residents, the families that had lived there for generations, would have no legal protection. They'd be forced out or priced out. It was predatory development disguised as neighborhood improvement. And Diane had been gathering intel on Marcus, on his neighborhood, on the families that might resist the plan. "Why are you telling me this?" Marcus asked. "Because I realized what I was doing," Diane said. "Because watching our children with you and with Dr. Hartwell, I realized that they know something about what matters, about what's real, and I was betraying that." She looked at Marcus. "Dr. Hartwell knows about this," she said. "She's been investigating the same thing. I didn't know it at first, but she's been researching the impact of these developments on communities. That's why she stopped on your road." Marcus felt the ground shift beneath him. "She knew where I was?" he asked. "No," Diane said, "but she knew the area. She was surveilling it for research purposes. Your stopping for her accelerated her interest in your situation." Everything Marcus had understood about his relationship with Dr. Hartwell suddenly felt transactional. In a way he hadn't fully grasped before. The scholarship wasn't charity, it was strategy. The job wasn't because he was qualified. It was because he needed to have money and stability, so that he'd be invested in fighting the development. The help wasn't about gratitude for stopping on a road. It was about stopping a developer. Marcus sat with this information for days. Everything felt like a lie. The help, the care, the Friday visits, all of it was part of something larger. He was a pawn in Dr. Hartwell's investigation. But then he sat with his children. Darius asked him directly, "Is Dr. Hartwell going away?" "I don't know, buddy," Marcus said. "Does she not like us anymore?" Aidan asked. "Yeah, she likes us," Marcus said, "and then it doesn't matter if she started by lying," Simone said, with the kind of clarity that 6-year-olds sometimes have. "It doesn't matter how things started if they became real." Marcus looked at his daughter. "Is she real?" Simone asked, and Marcus realized that yes, she was. The help had started as strategy, but somewhere in the process it had become real. She'd seen his children's faces, she'd watched Darius thrive, she'd listened to Aidan's questions, she'd felt Simone's empathy. And something had shifted from transaction to connection. He called Dr. Hartwell. "I know about Stratton," he said. "I know about why you are on that road." There was a silence on the other end. "Yes," she said finally. "Did you help us because of your investigation?" he asked. "It started that way," she said, "but it didn't stay that way." "How do I know that?" Marcus asked. "You don't," she said. You have to choose to believe it, just like I have to choose to believe that you'll forgive me for starting with a lie." Marcus thought about this. "I'm stopping the development," Dr. Hartwell continued. "I have documentation, email records, financial statements proving that Stratton deliberately targeted communities, that he knew which neighborhoods would have less political resistance, and I'm going to make sure that stops." "Why?" Marcus asked. "Because it's the right thing," she said, "and because I owe it to you and your children and everyone else in that neighborhood to use what I have to make a difference." Marcus realized something then. The help had been real from the moment she decided it was real, the moment she chose presence over strategy. "Okay," he said. "Okay, sure," she asked. "Help me save the neighborhood," Marcus said, "and we'll figure out the rest after." Over the next month, Dr. Hartwell and Diane gathered evidence. Emails where Stratton explicitly discussed which neighborhoods to target. Ones with lower voter participation, ones with communities of color, ones where residents wouldn't have the resources to fight back. Financial documents showing how the development strategy worked. Buy properties cheap, get zoning changed, force out long-term residents, sell to developers at marked up prices, profit from the displacement. It was predatory in a way that was both clear and legal. The system allowed it. The law hadn't caught up to the ethics. Marcus became the face of resistance. He did interviews, he told his story, he talked about what it meant to be a single father working 2 jobs and still not being able to get ahead. He talked about how neighborhoods like his were being targeted. Not because they were bad, but because they were vulnerable. The children became part of the narrative. Darius talked about wanting to protect his sisters, about understanding that there were people who wanted to take what his father had built. Aidan talked about wanting to build machines that help people, about understanding that buildings could be built to help or to exploit. Simone talked about everyone stopping crying, about what it meant when families had to leave their homes, because wealthy people wanted profit. The media picked up the story. An attorney took the case pro bono. She filed motions to block the rezoning. She submitted evidence of predatory practices. She brought Stratton's strategy into the light of a courtroom, where it had to be defended. Stratton's lawyers tried to discredit Dr. Hartwell. They suggested her involvement was a personal vendetta. They tried to discredit Marcus. They suggested his story was manufactured for sympathy. But the evidence was irrefutable. The judge ruled in favor of the neighborhood. The rezoning was blocked. Stratton was forced to divest the properties he'd acquired. And then came the federal investigation. The Department of Justice looked at Stratton's practices. They found pattern. They found proof of targeting based on race and income. They filed charges. Richard Stratton's company collapsed. His reputation was destroyed. He faced lawsuits from multiple communities. Justice, when it finally came completely. Stratton was forced to pay a settlement to the Neighborhood Development Fund. Residents had agency in what happened next. They had a voice in how their neighborhood would be revitalized. It wouldn't be development imposed on them from outside. It would be improvement chosen by them. New community center, youth programs, job training, business support for local entrepreneurs. The neighborhood didn't just survive, it thrived, and Marcus's role in that was recognized. He became a community development director. Not paid like the corporate world would pay him, but paid enough. Paid enough with dignity and purpose. Victoria Diane, who had become part of this story in a complicated way, worked with the community as a mediator. She helped other vulnerable families understand their rights. She became part of the solution, and the children watched it all. They watched their father stand up. They watched their father fight. They watched their father win. Marcus and Dr. Hartwell sat in the park where the community had begun to change, where the community center was being built, where the neighborhood was becoming something new. It was almost 2 years after he'd pulled over on an empty road. "You started by lying," Marcus said. "Yes," she said, "you used my gratitude to pursue your own agenda," Marcus continued. "Yes," she said again. "How do I know it became real?" he asked. "You don't," Dr. Hartwell said. "You have to choose to believe it, just like I have to choose to believe that you've forgiven me." Marcus looked at her. This woman who had stopped for him, who had seen something in him that was worth helping, who had built a strategy that had become something deeper. "Love," he said finally, "is when broken people choose each other anyway." Dr. Hartwell smiled. "Yes," she said, "that's exactly what it is." They didn't become a couple. That wasn't what they were. They became something deeper. Partners in growth. People bound by an exchange neither of them could undo. People who had chosen presence over convenience, and then had to figure out what that meant. Simone, now 8 years old, understood this better than anyone. "Adults are complicated," she told her brothers. "They hurt and help at the same time. What matters is choosing to stay and do the work." Years later, the children grew into their promises. Darius became a community organizer. He brought the protective instinct he'd learned as a 6-year-old to a larger community. He helped families understand their rights. He helped neighborhoods organize. He became the voice for people who didn't have one. Aidan studied engineering. He built water systems and infrastructure for underserved communities. He took the curiosity of childhood and turned it into work that mattered. Every project he undertook was guided by a question: how can we build something that helps people? Simone became a pediatric trauma surgeon. She worked specifically with children from marginalized communities. She spent her life making sure that vulnerable children got the care they deserved. She stopped for people the way her father had stopped on a road. And Marcus watched his children become the kinds of people he'd always wanted them to be, not because he'd given them money or resources, but because he'd shown them what it meant to choose presence over convenience, what it meant to see another person and decide their survival mattered. Dr. Hartwell remained part of their lives, not as a savior, not as a charity case, but as someone who had learned through them what it meant to live with purpose. Years later, Marcus's neighborhood was thriving, not gentrified, not colonized by outside money, genuinely improved by residents' choices. New businesses started by long-term residents. New programs designed by people who understood the community. New hope built by people who had fought for it. Marcus worked as community development director. He had stability and agency. He had a life that looked different than the one he'd been living. When he pulled over on that road, the children came back often. Darius to organize, Aidan to design infrastructure, Simone to speak at community forums about healthcare access. They remembered the moment their father chose to stop, and they understood that one person's choice to see another person, to value their survival, could change everything, could start a ripple that became a wave, that became transformation. That's what happened when someone chose kindness over convenience, when someone chose presence over profit. That's what happened when one man stopped on an empty road, and it changed everything. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe our channel for more stories about community courage and the quiet strength it takes to choose what's right even when it costs you.